This is Tomaki, and everyone thinks he's fat, old, and useless. To make it even worse, his daughter despises him, and his wife's cheating on him. So why would his coworker suddenly find him interesting? Did she always like him? Or could it be something more? Her eyes widened, and don't ask me how she's able to see this man's skeletal structure, but just know that she can. Not only that, but it was beautiful, as this truly is her ideal body. Tomaki Kurudo stands in shock as he was given the role of project leader, and it seems everyone else knew about it before him. It's as he walks out of his supervisor's office that he overhears a female co-worker gossiping about him. Sure, he's a good guy and all, but he's also quite unreliable, kinda similar to the classic midlife crisis of an old man. And even he also agrees that he's not the type to be a leader, since he's always filled with anxiety. But now isn't the time to be whining, but instead, he'll try his hardest not to trouble everyone. But speaking of trouble, Aikawa Raito lets him know there's a problem related to their vendor. It seems like they'll all have to carry the equipment themselves, and immediately seeks for the volunteers among the young people. And now that he thinks about it, now would actually be the best time for him to take charge. So he tries to get everyone's attention at first, but decided to call a bit louder, as he really needed everyone to listen. He knows they're all frustrated, but asked if everyone could help out, as it could all be good exercise. And Aikawa had to stop, bro, because truly, like, the young folks can handle it no problem. But Tomaki insists that he couldn't possibly just sit around and do nothing. Plus, this type of thing requires teamwork, and as he reluctantly thanks him, they made their way over to the venue. And once again, Tomaki took charge, since all the men should carry the heavy stuff, and encourages everyone to do their best. But as soon as bro started lifting, he damn near broke his back. And at this point, Aikawa insists that he leaves it to the younger ones, and he gives in immediately, settling to carry the smaller items. And when they found out that the elevator wasn't working, he was one of the first to recommend the stairs. But little did he know this was about to be his downfall, because even though he kept mentioning that he was fine, not wanting to be a burden to the others, these stairs were slowly kicking his ass, as now he just looks like a disgrace. They had to beg this man to stop, like just go sit down somewhere, bruh. And as he made his way back to the office, he couldn't help but overhear a conversation again of someone mentioning that he had no stamina, even though he had been fired up about taking the charge. He was the first to be warned out, and how he should have just stayed quiet. But not only that, but they also saw it earlier when he took off his blazer, how his stomach had been sticking out a lot, straight up calling our boy chubby, like he really is an old guy. Later that very same day, he took a good look at his stomach in the mirror, and bro straight up shaped like a titan, I ain't gonna lie. He stood still as he prepped himself, and decided to suck all that fat from his stomach in, but wasn't able to hold it for long. And that's when it hit him, that it really is sticking out, huh? When calling from behind him, Tomaki Sana, his daughter, tells him to get out, since she'll be getting in the bath. But before he left, he called out to her, curiously asking if maybe he looked like an old man. And at first she was confused, but within a heartbeat answered that of course he does. Actually, maybe he should put on some clothes already and stop showing off that embarrassing belly of his. It's while he made his way to bed that he called out for his wife, but it seems she just wasn't there, which had him thinking that she must have been in the bathroom. But then he couldn't help but notice her phone lying on her bed, with a missed call from Aikawa Raito, and he immediately realized it was his co-worker from earlier. He isn't able to understand why his wife would even be talking to Aikawa, especially since she's never mentioned him before. When suddenly, his wife opened their bedroom door, while he nervously drops her phone, introducing Tomaki Kaori, asking if something was wrong. They each went to lie down in their separate beds, and after she mentioned turning off the lights, silence settled over their room. It's yet as they laid there in the dark, he couldn't shake the thought from his head. He never thought his wife would be cheating on him, and as he reached forth his hand, shaking her out of her sleep, he asked if he could lay down some pipe, just like for old time's sake. And she really looked this man in his eyes and told him, stop it, get some help. Like, you're not young anymore, buddy. Just go on to bed already. And you could just tell from the look on his face. Bro was going through it. He's always being told he's an old man, and now he's just not young anymore. So he should just stay quiet. But it's not like he really wanted to get down and jiggy with her anyway. But he mostly wanted to confirm it, the way everyone sees him, that nobody has use for an old man such as himself. The next day while at the office, his co-worker asked if he had a moment, but Tomaki wasn't able to sleep at all last night, so he's kinda going through it. Ayase Mizuki, the woman standing before him, is quiet and doesn't socialize much, so he never really knows what she's thinking. But one thing's for sure, and it's that she gets her work done, so she's really easy to rely on. She wanted to ask him about yesterday's equipment, how it seems they'd still need one more on their floor, and wanted to know if he could help her carry one. And once he agreed and they made it over there, she asked if he'd be able to handle it. But once she placed it in his hand, bro damn near dislocated his hip, and as they both struggled to carry it, he pleads with her to slow down, but they crashed to the floor right after. The dust began to settle, and as he asked if she was okay, he hadn't even noticed that he had her pinned down, with her tatas hanging out. And my god, is she ripped. His eyes widen and he tries to get off her immediately, apologizing since he doesn't even know how he got her shirt off. My dog. She clutches her shirt, since he pretty much just harassed her, but he swears that that wasn't his intention. But seriously, how the hell did her clothes come off? But she wasn't into all this chit-chat and walked right on past him, removing a camera hidden on the top shelf. And with a single click of a button, she showed him that she had him in 4K. And immediately he knew it was wraps. Like, it's over for him. He's mortified, asking why. Why would she be doing this? But she simply replied that she had a request. She wants him to tag along with her somewhere. And later that very same day around 6 p.m, they made their way through a dark alley. And Tomaki seems to be pleading his case, that the image doesn't mean squat, since everyone already knows he'd never do something like that. And all she had to do was turn to look at him for his argument to fall apart, because even he's unsure now if anyone would have that kind of faith in him. Ayase curiously asked if he was the project manager currently, how if a scandal were to pop up, even as a rumor during this time, bro could really lose everything. And finally giving up, he asked what it was that she wanted, because if it's money, she shouldn't expect much because her boy's low-key kinda broke right now, especially since he has to deal with the mortgage. But it seems they had made it to the place. Hell and muscle. And as soon as they made it in, Tomaki was already crying out for dear life. And who wouldn't be? Especially after looking in this psychotic woman's eyes. She had this man doing bench presses, telling him to open up with his chest more. And not only that, but she ain't allowing him to take any breaks either. It's when they were finally done with bench presses, he asked her what was going on. And well, it was pretty simple. She was going to train him. And if he doesn't, then she'll definitely be spreading those images. And even though he tried asking her why, she insists they move on to the next exercise, squats, telling him to push with his hips. And as expected, his lower body was weak. And she would know since she had been watching him this whole time. And right as his knees were about to go out, he shouted that he couldn't endure it anymore. But she gripped this man tight, because hell no, she ain't done with him yet. Ayase needed him to lock in until the very end, to go all out. It's when Tomaki was done, she mentioned yet again that she knew it. he might not have the bulk yet, but his muscle shape is good. And while blushing, mentions that with his body, he could be her type. She's had her eyes on him for a while now. From the very moment they met, she could tell it all. His bone structure and his muscle shape. Exhausted, he asked what her goal was. And well, it was pretty simple. She likes muscular men, but not just anyone. There's a certain face and body that she likes. And to put it frank, Tomaki's her ideal body type. So she's offering to train him. And when he becomes her vision of an ultimate body, she wants to smash. Oh no! Tomaki couldn't believe what he just heard. And in a desperate attempt to get away from her, he tries to crawl away. But she latches right onto him, since there's no escaping now. Since she had even more evidence and played him an audio recording of their intense workout. And at this point, it didn't matter how the message was interpreted. But from now on, he didn't have a choice. And here marked the beginning of his journey, as it usually takes about 3 to 4 years to build muscle. So it looks like they'll be together for a long time. The next morning, his muscles hurt. Actually, his whole body felt sore. And as he walked into his living room trembling, his wife rushed right on past him, telling him to get out of the way since she's clearly busy, so he shouldn't just be wandering around. She wasn't able to make his lunch for the day and told him to handle it himself. Also, he wasn't allowed to eat out either since it was too expensive. Not only that, but she would apparently be home late tonight, so he'd have to make his own dinner as well. And as their daughter made her way through the front door, her mother pleads with her to at least say something before she leaves. And now that she thinks about it, she'll be leaving now as well. And not before long, the atmosphere became quiet as Tomaki's now home alone. He tries to get back on his feet, but his hand slips, and he fell straight to the floor. He decided he wasn't going to stay down forever though, and thought back to what Ayase had said about wanting to train him. Then all his previous memories came rushing in, of his own daughter thinking he was disgusting. And even his wife saw him as nothing more than a useless old man. Not to mention Aikawa's affair with his wife. And even at work that same day, he got made fun of again, since he's too old to be messing up. And then came all the requests from everyone around him, needing something from him. A few female co-workers noticed he's been looking really busy lately, wondering if he had been taking on too much work or maybe he was just some pushover. When suddenly, someone approached him about some work they had done, and it was none other than Ayase. She stared down at him with dark, cold eyes, and simply laid out all the work she had done that needed his report. Right as he took a look and thanked her for being such a good help, he looked up and she had already left. That's when Aikawa approached him from behind, since Ayase is as cold as ever, startling him. And as soon as he saw him, he remembered that Aikawa called his wife the other night. Aikawa asked if maybe he and Ayase were close, but they're just co-workers. She hasn't really been known for warming up to her other colleagues, and since she's really pretty, it seems a few people tried to shoot their shot, but she just walked right on past them without paying them any attention. Not only that, but she also has her guard up. And no one really knows about her private life, except for Tomaki, who got to see her in action at the gym. Curious, Aikawa asked if maybe Tomaki knew something about her, but he swears he doesn't know anything. Actually, at this point, he's unsure if what happened yesterday was even real, that maybe it was all just a bad dream. When suddenly, he got a direct message and noticed it had been from Ayase, instructing him to go to the equipment room during lunch break and check on the top right shelf. So right as the clock had struck 12, he quietly moved away from his desk and made his way over to the equipment room. And that's when he noticed his hands had touched something. It's once he made it outside that he noticed Ayase had packed him some lunch. But once he took a bite and began to chew, he couldn't help but notice it was just bland, and wonders if this is what they call muscle food. And so, it wasn't a dream after all. In fact, this woman's crazy. But since he wasn't able to bring lunch, even something like what she made could be considered food. So he's more than grateful. But actually, now that he thinks about it, did she actually know this was gonna happen? Psh, nah. It's probably just a coincidence. All while a dark figure watches him from a distance behind a tree. Later, when he had made it back into the office, it seems the lunch he had today was a bit unsatisfying. So he figured he'd just drown his hunger with a coffee filled with lots of sugar. When suddenly, Ayase had appeared behind him, asking if by any chance he had a moment. And once he turned to give her his undivided attention, he shortly after walked away and took a sip of his coffee, but immediately spat it out since it had somehow turned into plain hot water. And while he continued to make his way through the office, Aikawa asked if he wanted some snacks, since their business partner had actually sent some chocolate over. And right as he was about to take a bite, she low-key instant transmitted behind him, since he had actually gotten a call, and grabbed onto him, pulling Tomaki towards his desk. It's right as he was about to sit down that he noticed something yet again. There was something placed on his desk, with another message from Ayase reading that they were snacks, so he should make sure to eat them. But it was yet again the same thing he had for lunch, and he couldn't help but think how weird it was he had interrupted his chocolate snacks just to bring him more food. And at the end of the workday, she immediately sprung from her seat and dashed towards the door. And it seems she had this habit of leaving work at the same time as usual. But running right behind her was none other than Tomaki, and they couldn't help but think how unusual it was he had left on time. But shortly after, while walking through the streets, Tomaki looked everywhere for Ayase. So imagine his surprise when she suddenly appeared right behind him, commending him for leaving work on time as instructed. But bro's asking all the right questions, because how the hell did she even get his number? And well, simply because she knows everything about him. And that's why she'll completely transform him herself. And with that, it was time to train. She slams him to the floor and began twisting his stomach with her feet. But all of that just left him confused, wondering what she was even doing to him. And apparently, she had been loosening his fascia since his abdominal pressure was weak, practically useless. And so next it was on to leg tosses, as her focus now is training his abs. But not only that, she needed him to get those crunches in, holding it all in firmly. And since he had touched his back against the floor, then she'd need 5 more reps as punishment. And she ain't easing up just yet, because next were planks. And it seems he was at his limit, unable to hold it in anymore. But she suddenly appeared beneath him, laying on the floor, asking if he was really about to collapse on her, especially since he knows what would happen if he did. And as their breath collide, he swung his head back in an attempt to not have their faces so close, but indirectly thrusted his hips against hers. And even though she asked what he was doing, you can kinda just tell that she's having the best time of her life right now, and went on to tease him, since what if both his wife and daughter saw him thrusting another woman like this, instructing him to keep his body straight for just 10 more seconds. And as she counted down from 5 all the way down to 3, she decided to take her time with 2 and 1, since she loved being underneath him. And right as he collapsed, she grabbed a hold of his chubby stomach, since she knows he isn't able to see it just yet, but she'll expose his rectus abdominis, or in other words, his abs buried underneath all that fat, and sinks her teeth into his stomach. Bro, what am I reading? Later that very same day, while making his way to his apartment, he entered and mentioned he was home, but then remembered that his wife did say she'd be home late. And there on his kitchen table was dinner from Ayase again. And if that's the case, then maybe it would be a good snack along with some beer. But then suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message from Ayase forbidding him from having any alcohol. And at this point, he might be onto something, because how is she able to know what he's doing? Maybe she had installed some cameras or something around the place, when suddenly his wife had walked in mentioning she was home, scaring the absolute crap out of him. Her eyes darted towards the food on the table, and she couldn't help but ask if he had made it himself. And of course, he had no other option but to say that he did. But that alone was suspicious, because why would he be eating out of a plastic container at home? When yet again, he got another message from Ayase, recommending that he takes an hour-long bath after eating to soak, rather than taking a shower. But that alone had caught his wife's attention, asking who it was, and he simply replied that it was a subordinate from work, which I guess is actually not a lie. And so he hurried over to clean up after himself. And later that night after his bath, he went to take a look in the mirror yet again. He knows she's only treating him like he's her toy. How he couldn't possibly keep living like this, wondering if maybe he should just tell his wife about his relationship with Ayase, that it isn't anything suspicious. After all, it's not like he's guilty of anything. When just then, his daughter walked into the bathroom, noticing that her dad was there again. But her eyes widened when she noticed the strange bite mark on his stomach. He quickly apologized while putting on his pajamas and wishes her a good night. His wife would then leave their shower and notice he had already been sleeping soundly, and couldn't help but think how fast it was, since it was only just 10 p.m. Regardless, she heads into bed, turns the light off, and turns to face away from him, when suddenly a dark figure gazed into their bedroom. It stared blankly ahead, unblinking, until Kaori turned and noticed the blinds had been left open. And as she rose to close them, the dark figure slipped quietly back into their apartment upstairs, lying down in their bed as they gazed to their 6 glowing monitors, each streaming from hidden cameras inside Tomaki's home, revealing Ayase, who looks forward to watching him eat, sleep, and grow stronger. While she shook her shake, Tomaki talks about how he's been helping his co-workers with their problems, all while his wife affirms him that it must have been really tough. It's not long after that Ayase sits down to have her breakfast, while she yet again heard his wife mention that she'll prepare something for his lunch. But he stops her, mentioning that it's fine, as he just doesn't need lunch today. And with a speaker connected to the lower apartment, Ayase hears everything that's being said below. A text message chimes in from Tomaki's phone, reminding him that he should eat rice instead of bread. And since bread is high in fat and gets absorbed easily, rice would be able to keep him full for much longer. But not only that, but natto would be great as well. Plus, some citric acid could help to reduce his muscle pain. But when his daughter noticed they were eating rice instead of bread, she turned to her dad, but he thinks it's fine every once in a while. But she shouts that she doesn't want it and storms off, when yet another message came in instructing him to leave for work. Also, he shouldn't use the elevator but the stairs instead. And as Ayase gets ready to go to work herself, she notes how their office is on the 15th floor, so it should take some time to climb. But then his wife noticed some crushed beer cans and wondered if maybe he had done it. And if that's the case, how was he able to crush them like that? But he seems a bit confused, because he actually didn't have any beer. She also asked if he was leaving already, as it's still really early. But he only mentions that he needs a bit more time today to get there. And as Ayase leaves her apartment upstairs, so did he. But his wife still seems a bit suspicious, watching as he made his way through the door. While on his way to work, Tomaki still doesn't get how Ayase is able to know what he's doing, and figured that today's the day he finds out. So right as he made it to work, he peeks over to watch Ayase busy at her computer. And as usual, she won't speak unless it's necessary. So instead, he'll use work as an excuse to investigate. So, right as he made his way over to her, he cheerfully asked about the estimate, but she quickly responded that it was discussed in the morning meeting. And in another attempt, he tried to ask where the meeting recordings were, but she yet again answered swiftly, leaving him no room to keep the conversation going. And as he took up a black coffee, his phone buzzed yet again, since the canned coffee had way too much sugar in it. So she politely asked him to throw it out. And not being able to handle it anymore, he asked if she could meet him in the pantry, and immediately gets right to business, asking how it was she was able to know what he was doing all the time. But she gently grabbed the coffee out of his hand and poured it down the drain, since it really didn't matter. What's more important is that he cuts down on all this unnecessary sugar. And when she was done, she held the can between the palm of her hands and crushed it effortlessly. Since in bulking, it's not all about training but dieting as well. And this was her attempt to reform his lazy eating habits. How it would all be fine if he just followed her. At least then, he'd surely be reborn. But while walking over towards him, she mentioned that there was one more thing. And while placing the crushed can in his hand, it reminded him of the one his wife mentioned that morning. And while walking past him, she mentioned that he was absolutely forbidden from drinking alcohol. His lunch and snacks are going to be on the shelf as usual, but other than that, he's only allowed to drink water or tea. Anything else would be considered extra calories, and those will just end up as fat. And as she turned to face him, she mentioned that they'll be changing his breakfast starting tomorrow, while reassuring him that she's always by his side. And they left the pantry together shortly after, which caught Aikawa's attention. And yet again, at 6 p.m. on the dot, Ayase decided she'll be leaving first. And right behind her was none other than Tomaki. And it seems lately he had been leaving on time. And it has the rest of his co-workers wondering if maybe it's all because of Ayase. And if that's the case, maybe the two could be meeting up outside. And that's exactly what's going on, because Tomaki's already in pain, since now they're on to doing deadlifts. And bro's back's already aching him. But from Ayase's perspective, it's all no good, since at this rate, he'll just injure himself before he reaches muscle hypertrophy. Instead, what he needs to do first for deadlifts is bend his body around his hip joint, and instructs him to keep his eyes on her, since he should just imagine pushing his butt backwards, and tells him to take a good look at her. But bro's not locked in at all, so she decided to show him herself, instructing him to bend his hips down more. And not only that, but he should be trying to match his movements with hers, similar to thrusting his hips forward, and decides to give him a live demonstration. And yo, why is she enjoying herself so much? But Tomaki swears that he gets it, backing up off her, as there's no reason she had to be sticking that close to him. And with that, they're back to their deadlifts again. And after their session, he decided to hit the shower. And bro is damn near at his limit. He has no idea the last time he felt this tired, and how it seems working adults just don't have that much energy. He then went on and tried to get some shampoo, but it seems it was already empty. So someone in the shower right next to him handed him some of theirs. And of course it was none other than Ayase. Like, did you expect someone else? He shouts and asked her what she was doing in there. And well, simply enough, she had worked up a sweat as well. Plus, she thought it might be a great idea to check the progress on his body. And what better place to do that than the shower? But while closing his eyes shut, he asked if she didn't feel ashamed being together with a man like him. But she's like, why? After all, her body's perfect, and she has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. But I think she might have missed the point, because that's not at all what he meant. A little while after at home, Kaori's shocked to hear that her husband was project manager, But the person on the phone mentions that Tamaki's actually really popular in the office, but his wife wonders if maybe they mean he's being made fun of a lot. And while speaking to Aikawa, she asked why he hadn't told her husband that he's actually her cousin, since if he does, he might be able to get special treatment. But that goes against what he wants entirely. He's asking her to keep it quiet for now. Plus, if he were to catch them talking, they might just be caught. So he curiously asked what Tomaki was doing currently, but he actually hasn't made it back home yet, which shocked Saikawa since he left right after work. But then suddenly remembered that he saw both Tomaki and Ayase hanging out a lot, and quickly told Kaori never mind, and decided to hang up the phone suddenly. And as she sat there wondering what the hell just happened, Tomaki walked through the front door while mentioning that he was now home. And as usual, he was completely worn out. And right as he walked past her, she noticed that fresh smell someone would have right after a bath. Plus, that's definitely not their shampoo she's smelling. But all that seems to be on his mind is how easy it is to say goodbye to Ayase, and how that at least helps ease the fear of being seen with each other. It seems he doesn't want dinner either, since he already ate bland chicken breast. But before he left, she couldn't help but notice he was exhausted, and asked where he was. And of course, without a second thought, he mentions that he's coming from work. And that's when she knew he wasn't telling the whole truth, but simply replied, "I see." It's later on while she entered their bedroom, she noticed him sleeping soundly yet again. How recently he's been going to bed a lot earlier, and decided to go check the shirt he had worn earlier that day. And right as she went over to take a whiff, she noticed something. A piece of hair lingering on his shirt, and stared at it with pitch black eyes. The next morning, yet another shake was being made, but actually, it was Tamaki's this time. Before him, he had his protein oatmeal with boiled eggs, and began chowing down, and both his wife and daughter could only stare, wondering who the man before them could possibly be. But when he noticed their awkward stares, he mentions that he had actually bought it yesterday, since he's been thinking of going on a diet. Shocked, his wife asked why, and once he thought about it, along with what Ayase told him previously about wanting to smash, bro couldn't bring himself to say it. But his daughter breaks the silence by asking if maybe he felt insecure about what she said, if it was all because she mentioned he had a belly. And seizing this opportunity of a lifetime, he stood to his feet, mentioning that she was right. After all, it's super embarrassing, and asked his daughter if she'd like to have some of his food, since it's good for your body. But she shuts the whole offer down since it all looks super gross. Meanwhile, Ayase watches Kaori on camera 31. How did we get to 31? Thinking how it seems she was really clumsy. The next morning, Kaori rolls out of bed, and apparently she wasn't able to sleep at all last night. It's shortly after that she turned and noticed that Tomaki wasn't lying next to her. And so while making her way into their kitchen, there he was up and active. It's then that Tomaki wishes her a good morning, while also mentioning that he had made both her and Sana some toast. She couldn't help but realize he had been waking up early recently, but it's really only because he's been going to bed on time, so he finds himself waking up naturally. Not only that, but he wanted to let her know that he also wouldn't be needing dinner tonight, which has her a little concerned because he's been eating out a lot lately. But he nervously gave an excuse that it's only because he's been socializing a lot with his co-workers lately, and quickly made his way towards the front door, before letting her know that he'll be off. And it's when he had made it to work shortly after that he had gotten right to it. Even his co-workers couldn't help but notice how busy he seemed lately. Not only that, but he also seemed different. He was much more livelier than before, and they couldn't help but wonder if something had happened to him. And that very same confidence of his carried over into his presentation later that day. And even his boss could tell that bro's aura had changed. How choosing him as the new project leader was the right call to make. But while pointing towards Tomaki's presentation, he wanted to know more about a topic he missed, related to their load test. But Tomaki had completely forgotten about it, until a notification came in on his laptop of the full load test Ayase had compiled for him. And without delay, he got right to presenting it. And as expected, Tomaki was on a roll, with his boss entrusting their next period to him as well. And before he knew it, all his subordinates had surrounded him, congratulating him on doing such a great job. But not only that, but Aikawa couldn't help but glaze, talking about how Tomaki had been looking great lately, and recommends that they have a wrap-up party to celebrate. It's after a while that both Tomaki and Ayase had went on a walk in a nearby park, and he wanted to thank her for coming in clutch for him earlier, but she insists she was just doing her job. One thing's for sure though, and it's that he's been feeling great, and it's low-key all thanks to her, blackmailing him into getting into shape. But just then, Ayase noticed something from the corner of her eyes. A kitten all by itself, standing upright in a box labeled "Take Me." It's when they made their way over to it that Ayase immediately got her phone out and made a call, letting the person on the other line know that she'll be there immediately, before shortly after mentioning that she'll be taking the kitten to the vet. Tomaki insists he accompanies her, but she swiftly turned around, asking if he didn't have work to complete, while she, on the other hand, had actually finished up work for the day. And so while she ran off, she mentioned that she'll be joining the party, but she might be late, so he shouldn't worry about it. And this all comes as a shock to him, as he always thought she was cold-hearted. Meanwhile, at Kaori's workplace, someone mentions out loud that it's definitely an affair, which had her jolt nervously, with a cold sweat beating down her cheek. But turns out they weren't talking about her, but rather a young actress who's getting down and jiggy with her co-worker, who just so happened to be a middle-aged man, which has all the ladies in the office wondering why she had picked such an old geezer, all while Kaori types away on Google signs of an affair. And for sure, if you're seeing these signs, then your partner's sus as hell. The signs are, if they're going out more, always on their phone, caring about their appearance, suddenly being kind, vague when talking about outings, and lastly, reduced intimacy. It seems Tomaki had been checking all those boxes from the time he had mentioned he didn't need dinner and started going out more, caring about his appearance by going on a diet, suddenly being kind by making her breakfast, not to mention he's always on his phone talking to his subordinates. And lastly, he's always vague when talking about where he's been. It's when she pieces it all together that she truly felt despair. But she warns herself to get it together, as there's still one left, reduced intimacy, and thought to herself that she has to throw some cheeks on him tonight just to confirm. It was later that very same evening, while Tomaki's co-workers gathered together, that someone asked if Ayase had left early, but she'll actually be stopping by later, so they should all just start the party without her. And if that's the case, Tomaki thought that now might be his chance to get a beer. But Big Mama grabbed onto him so fast, since alcohol is bad for his muscle. Instead, he can have some oolong tea. It's while they made their way back to their co-workers, Tomaki asked how the kitten was doing, and apparently it wasn't in bad shape at all, but it's being held at the vet for now. And as expected, Tomaki commends her efficiency, but then noticed she never responded and asked her if anything was troubling her. Yet all she could think about was whether the cat would be adopted. It's while Tomaki gazed down towards her that he couldn't help but smile, as he never noticed she had such a kind side to her, how she really is amazing. It's while he smiled yet again at her that her eyes began to widen, and she whispered, "Not really." But shortly after was interrupted when someone yelled her name from a distance, and while everyone wondered who the hell this guy could even be, he mentioned that he finally found her, asking why she had all of a sudden disappeared on him. But most importantly, he had to confess just how much his body is unable to live without her touch. And as Aikawa runs over to ask what was going on, Tomaki had whispered to her, asking who the guy before them was. And turns out, it's actually her ex-boyfriend. And neither him nor Aikawa could have possibly seen that one coming. And yo, why is bro taking off his shirt to flex like that? Mentioning how she was the one who trained his body. And just like before, he wants her to be rough with him. And now everyone's getting the wrong idea. Because when he says rougher, is he referring to like bedroom activities? And who would have thought that the lonely and mysterious Ayase had an ex? But most shockingly, she had a dark side. As everyone proceeds to lose their mind, Tomaki knew right away that this guy was a muscle training victim. Like he's just like him, trained and targeted by Ayase. And not before long, her ex grabbed on to her, pulling her away by the arm, since he's convinced their relationship isn't over. And as Tomaki tries to stop him, he stepped in front, blocking her ex from going any further, since he completely understands and tries to convince him not to be violent. But noticing the blisters on Tomaki's hand, her ex knew right away that they were barbell calluses and asked if she was doing it with some old dude now, training him and having fun with him. How she should just cut the fake decent act already, calling her a hoe to her face. And Tomaki said hell nah and sucker punched bro right in the jaw. Like I never knew he had it in him. Straight up told her ex to watch his mouth, like he was his child. And not only that, but he needed him to apologize pronto. But her ex wasn't about to take that line down and literally tried to fold Tomaki in half. But someone ended up saving bro's life by calling the cops. And before they knew it, Tomaki was back home at his apartment. And right as Kaori opened the front door, she asked what had happened. But with urgency, Aikawa mistakenly called her by her first name, asking if by any chance they had a first aid kit. And while he slowly brought Tomaki in, Kaori noticed someone else standing by their door. None other than Ayase. It's once they got settled that Aikawa retells the story of Tamaki's heroic evening, all while his wife scolds him. But Ayase interrupts, since it was all her fault, as Tomaki was just trying to stand up for her. It's then that Kaori asked who she was. And as Ayase introduced herself as Tamaki's subordinate, she mentioned how truly grateful she is for everything he's done for her. And that's when Kaori knew this was the subordinate he had been mentioning this whole time. And not before long, Aikawa and company decided to take their leave. It's while he was walking down the street with Ayase that he couldn't help but feel as though he had a newfound respect for Tomaki, putting himself on the line for other people. But most importantly, he wanted to know where Ayase lived, asking if he could see her home. But right as he turned around, she had vanished. Back at the Tamaki's residence, Kaori stands before her bedroom door, thinking now's the time to throw some cheeks on her husband. And while she opened the door in front of her, she mentioned how she had turned him down the last time, but asked what about now. But bro's already dead asleep. Like, he might not have had the chance to get the yams, but he's for sure dreaming about them as we speak. All while Kaori stands over his unconscious body, thinking back to the young lady, Mizuki Ayase, and the despair from earlier returned. But she quickly spun around and plopped right into bed. Meanwhile, Ayase appeared by their window yet again, and it seems his injuries are fine, which in this case means that he's all good for training tomorrow. But suddenly, she remembers everything he had said before, how amazing she was, and how he even felt someone like her was worthy of being apologized to. And as she yet again watched him sleep, her eyes began to glow as she stared right back at him. But her moment was short-lived, when Kaori had suddenly moved, leaving her no other choice but to retreat. But now she's just left confused with her own thoughts. How does she feel about Tomaki? And where do they even go from here? In the bustling office cafeteria, Ayase sits alone as she stares at the meal she prepared before her, with dried mackerel, spinach, and natto being among the many dishes. And while she stared at the dried mackerel, Tomaki's face formed the head of the fish as he shouted to apologize. Her eyes widened, and as she took a closer look, it was just the mackerel after all. It's then that she takes a moment to gather herself and began mixing her natto, when yet again, there she saw Tomaki's face as he whispered how great she was. And at this point, she decided to put the whole tray down because she is tripping. When suddenly calling Ayase from a distance, her co-workers mention how unusual it was seeing her in the cafeteria, since she usually brings her own bento. And as they sat down next to her, Ayase apparently forgot to make it last night since, she had something on her mind. And they totally get it, since it must have been because of her ex. And honestly, sometimes they end up rethinking things a bit too much lately. But speaking of rethinking, they had no idea Tomaki was so passionate, and how he's low-key kinda cool now. But they wanted to know what Ayase thought, and at this point, she's just trying to distract herself. Not only that, but they think Tomaki must have lost weight recently as well, since somehow his waist looks a lot slimmer. Apparently, beginners usually lose weight when muscle training, but since her goal is bulking, she can't help but feel like she should be training more with Tomaki, which means she'll be spending more time with him together. And as her eyes widened, her co-worker sitting across from her comments that she's put on a bit of weight and thinks about inviting Tomaki to lunch tomorrow so he can give her some tips. And with a single flick of her wrist, the dish in the palm of her hands shattered as jealousy bleeds through the cracks beneath her calm exterior. Her co-workers exchanged a worried glance, wondering if she was alright, while she sat before them, silent and motionless. Elsewhere, leaving from out the male's restroom, Tomaki's bowel movements have been great lately. I did not need to know that. Not only that, but he also noticed he lost weight. He wonders if it's all thanks to Ayase and thinks to himself that he should be grateful, even though he's clearly being blackmailed. And now that he thinks about it, she did mention she likes macho guys. So the task at hand is to lose even more weight, so she'll eventually lose interest and give up on him. So when they finally made it to Hell and Muscle, Ayase stood before the gym's door, and upon opening it, she thanked Tomaki for his patience, and he was already there getting his stretches in, with a usual easy smile on his face. He playfully asked if she was gonna bully him today as well, and her heart started beating wildly. She quickly turned her head away from him as he asked if everything was okay, but while turning back around to face him, she mentioned it was nothing. But now their faces were only inches apart, and the same feeling from before emerged. She quickly dashed back in a panic and slammed her back against the wall, trying to create some distance between them. Once more, he anxiously asked what was going on with her, but she swears it's all fine. Instead, they should just start their workout, and it was none other than bench presses. It's then that she noticed he was at his limit and decided to lend a hand, but right as she made direct eye contact, he folded once again, leaving him to rely on the safety bars. And without even acknowledging it, she just made her way over towards the dumbbells, mentioning that Tomaki doesn't seem to be feeling well today. But if you ask me, it kinda sounds like she's projecting. But if that's the case, he doesn't need to force himself to lift heavier weights, but dumbbells would work just fine, and recommends they start off with just 15 pounds. So as she passed the dumbbells over towards him, his hands gently grazed hers, and this lady threw the damn things to the floor, leaving him no other choice but to call her out, since she's been acting really strange all day, and demands that she looks at him. And this woman really turned towards him for a second, and then looked away again, before finally mentioning that that would be all for today. It's while she's walking away, Tomaki can't help but wonder if she's feeling sick or something. How honestly, he feels a bit worried about her. But someplace else, Ichika thinks it's really rare for her older sister to ask her for advice. But Ayase seriously doesn't have a clue what's going on with her. Her physical condition seems to be fine, but her mental state is unstable, from her blood pressure to her muscle distribution. But there are moments when she loses concentration, and as a result, her temperature rises along with her heart rate, especially when she's with a particular person, or even when she's just thinking about him. And if that's the case, Ichika wants to know all about this guy, and Ayase really said bet, and got straight to yapping about her mans. And with her sister all caught up, Ayase wonders if maybe it's because his muscles have been reacting in sync with hers. Bro, what? And that's when her sister had to let her know that she more than likely just has a thing for this Tomaki guy. And this woman still ain't clocking what she's talking about, leaving Ichika to spell it out for her. And then, after a moment, everything started coming together. This crazy lady launches from her seat, and once she had landed, got straight to working out. And once she had exhausted herself, she thought back to Tomaki while feeling her beating chest, and wondered if this is what liking someone felt like. As Ayase stepped into the warm shower, steam curled around her, and her eyes widened slightly as the water trickled against her face, having her recall the moment when she first spotted her ex, pointing out to him as he was the one she wanted. They would then immediately get right to training, and before she knew it, her ideal body was complete. But when it was finally time to get down and jiggy, she just couldn't do it, realizing that she didn't actually like him, which led her to wonder what the true meaning of liking someone meant. And it all just makes her frustrated since she can't seem to find the answer, feeling completely lost. But just like muscle training, the first step is to verify it, which meant that there was only one option left. And now, she was off to work alongside her crush. It was later that very same day at the office, Tomaki assigns his group with the task for the day, but couldn't help but notice Ayase was facing the wall, and asked if by any chance she was listening. Meanwhile, Ayase's losing her mind. Somehow she always turns away on reflexes. But not only that, the side of her body that's facing him always gets so hot. So in an attempt to not disrupt the meeting, she politely asked them to proceed. And if that's the case, Tomaki continues and mentions an off-site inspection. He'd really like if someone who knows a thing or two about video editing could tag along with him. Meanwhile, Ayase's body is still on fire, and it has her feeling like her metabolism is improving. Or at least, that seems to be the effect of liking someone. But as it relates to who would go out with Tomaki, Aikawa recommends that he be the one to tag along with him. But believe it or not, everyone else thinks that Ayase would be a better fit, since she knows everything about that department. So while drawing in a little closer, Ayase's coworker wanted to know if she knew how to do it. And of course it was within her area of expertise, since she does it all the time. And if that's the case, it was a done deal. And so this time around, Ayase will be the one accompanying Tomaki. But since Ayase had agreed without fully understanding what the hell was going on, it took her coworkers coming up to her after their meeting, mentioning how if she had gone with Aikawa, it might have turned into a little date. And that's all it took for everything to finally click, as she'll be going on a date with Tomaki. And with that expression, there was absolutely no time to waste, as she took to the internet to look up dating tips. And it's completely beyond her what she should even wear. Sure, she is good at fitness, but dating outfits are far beyond her. Not to mention, the biggest requirement of all is being cute. So if she's able to put the drip together just right, then it could make his heart flutter. And not only that, but the way she acts matters too. So tonight's the night she draws up the perfect plan before the date, knowing that tomorrow she'll for sure get his attention. And so the very next day, she turned and noticed in her peripheral that Tomaki was on his way. So this was finally her chance. And with that, Operation Technique number 1 was in full motion, to go up to him like a puppy. But she damn near speed blitzed straight towards this man. And just look at her. She's dripped out from head to toe. Why are you lying? Feast your eyes on the ultimate sweet and cute outfit, created through extensive research. But wait, there's more. Because she also added some small touches. like the new and popular cat nail tips. And believe it or not, all of this had left Tomaki speechless. But honestly, in his opinion, her dress might be a bit too much. And unfortunately for them, they don't seem to have much time to change it now. So they have to go. But all that seems to be on Ayase's mind is that he didn't even notice her nails. Though there isn't going to be much to worry about. After all, it's just the beginning. And she definitely has more techniques up her sleeve to catch his attention. So when they had finally made it to their client, it was finally time for her to master all her techniques. For instance, technique number 2, looking up at him. Or technique number 3, the physical touch. Or how about technique number 4, turning her body towards him. And lastly, technique number 5, expressing her feelings out loud. And she was absolutely running through all these techniques, having Tomaki apologize to each and every one of his clients, when suddenly he had called out to her, and before she knew it, she had been face to face with Tomaki, and all that seemed to have been on her mind was just how close he had been to her, when just then, Tomaki leaned in even closer, ready to whisper in her ear, asking what the hell she was trying to do, since it's really rude to the other party, asking if she could please try to act serious, and it seems his words had completely thrown her off her game, as she quickly apologized for how terribly sorry she was. And later that very same night, while they met together to have dinner, Ayase had completely been in the dumps for acting a fool all day, leaving Tomaki to cover up for her, mentioning that she was just under the weather, when just then, walking into the building was none other than the big boss himself, the president they had been trying to pitch to this whole time. The only problem is that he's known for being a difficult person, and just as he made his way to the table, Tomaki took the opportunity to introduce Ayase as a member of his staff, and it took the president only a single glance to think that she was dressed rather festively, complaining about how the young people these days are just something else. And not before long, the place had gone completely silent, leaving Tomaki no other choice but to fill in the dead spaces, asking if the president also worked out by any chance. And apparently he does, claiming that he can actually bench press about 220 pounds. And that moment alone had perked up Ayase's ear. Meanwhile, Tomaki mentions that he's only able to lift around 110 pounds himself, which led Ayase to activate her Sharingan, as she takes a closer look at this man's muscle structure, and it had piqued her interest in asking exactly when it was that he had achieved that 220 pounds. And well, if he had to think about it, then it was about 10 years ago. But if it's been that long, then Ayase fears he hasn't progressed since then. And let's just say the president didn't like her little attitude. But not allowing him to get a single word out, Ayase then shifted, asking him what other exercises he could do other than bench presses. And well, the old man sometimes dabbled in a little dumbbell and shoulder press. But that had completely disappointed Ayase, as she calls him a fool, claiming that he was nothing more than just a hog, since his upper body was the only part that was trained, which could lead to poor balance. And at this point, he's low-key just fat. Plus, he doesn't even know the exercise names or muscle groups, so he's just ignorant. So for such a person to lecture others on muscle training is completely ridiculous in her opinion. And once again, he was nothing more than a typical bench hog. But Buddy wasn't about to take that lying down, since there's no way a little girl like her could criticize him, warning her not to get all worked up over something as trivial as muscle training. But to dismiss her whole life as trivial had ticked her off even more, and it had made her realize that she had to show him who she really was, as she stood up and stripped right in front of them, flexing her muscles, as she was about to show them how it was done. And not long after, the president screams for dear life echoed in the distance, as Ayase sat upon his back, telling him to drop and give her 50, all while Tomaki yells that she should stop. And needless to say, the night had ended in a complete disaster, as Ayase once again bowed down before him, apologizing, as when it comes on to men's muscles, she just can't seem to help herself. And as Tomaki looked down towards her, it left Ayase thinking how terrible it all was. everything from her date techniques failing to getting scolded, and especially how she started wilding out over some muscles, and now she's even further from being liked, and it was all just a huge failure. To think when she was younger, everyone would always mention how flawless and perfect she was, not to mention the discipline it took her working hard to attain the perfect body. But now, maybe she had been completely useless this whole time, when suddenly, Tomaki couldn't help but let out a laugh, and shortly after apologized, realizing now that she too had been flawed, and so she shouldn't worry too much about it. But now that he thinks about it, he really is obsessed with men's muscles. But seriously, she didn't have to worry about it at all, since the inspection itself had gone really well, and the president left in a surprisingly good mood, going as far as to send Tomaki a few messages, mentioning how he had a great workout, and how he looks forward to seeing Ayase again. And who knows, maybe he got addicted to her Spartan style of training. But overall, Ayase did a good job today, mentioning that they should head back home, since it's getting pretty late. But then he had suddenly turned around, as there was one last thing he wanted to say to her, as those nails she had on were really cute, and he's been thinking about them since this morning, leaving Ayase in complete shock. But he wasn't done yet, since his daughter had been asking for the same one, so he'd like her to tell him more about them later. And as Ayase had begun to tremble, a blush crept across her cheeks, since today had been a complete success. But she wasn't able to relish in her victory for too long, since Tomaki needed them to hurry up before the train left. As Ayase sat down to talk with her sister, she genuinely thinks that it's all thanks to her nail why the date had turned out to be a success. And so with that in mind, she is thinking of doing something similar for their next training session. But with that, her sister had heard enough. She understood that Ayase was happy. Plus, this Tomaki guy really seems pretty cool for noticing her nails, since it's not something guys usually do. But Ayase thinks it's mostly because of his daughter, since she had been asking for the exact same ones for the longest time, which had completely taken her sister by surprise, as she never knew the guy had a kid, and immediately asked if he was divorced or something. And well, not really, since his wife is perfectly fine and well, as the family of 3 is doing great. Shocked, her sister asked if she was really hitting on some married guy. If things were to actually work out, that would be considered an affair. But Ayase simply didn't hear a word, as she's more so concerned that she might just touch him in their next training session. Although if it's through the gloves, hopefully she could manage not to get too flustered. But touching him with her bare hands is just too much at the moment. Even so, her sister didn't appear all that worried, as she is sure it'll all just end up as an innocent first love. His daughter makes an uproar over the new nail tips he had just gotten her. And not only that, but he had also bought her nail polish as well. But he charges her to only wear them on her days off, and also to be careful when washing her hands, as they might just peel off. And as his daughter ran off to show all her friends, his wife would call out to her, as she demands that she says thank you to her father before she does. And as she stopped where she stood, Sana quietly blushes as she thanks her dad for everything, before slipping out of the room moments later, leaving just Tomaki and his wife to talk. She praises him for doing really well on his business trip, which led her to curiously ask who he had went with. And Tomaki wasn't at all ready for such a question, as he began to choke on his own drink, mentioning that it was just a member of staff. And if that's the case, she wonders if by any chance he could be referring to the person who came by their house the other day. But they both had two completely different people in mind, as in fact, both Aikawa and Ayase were there. And so, thinking she was referring to Aikawa, he mentioned that that kid did offer to go, but he asked someone else instead, leaving his wife with no other choice but to get right up in his face, as she patiently stared back at him, and shortly after let out a sigh of relief, which had Tomaki thinking that this might have been the best time to talk to his wife about Ayase. But when his daughter had shouted that the bath was ready, she took the opportunity to go in next, without even giving him a chance to explain. and it was while she had been relaxing in that said bath that she had thought about her husband. Normally when he lies, his eyes always look up to the right, but this time he looked her directly in the eyes when he answered her. So she knew for a fact that he hadn't been lying, and apologizes for doubting him, as now she's sure it had just been her imagination all along, so she might as well just forget all about it. But it seems the following day, Aikawa had been curious about whether something was going on between the two, so he decided to ask Ayase directly. But she simply just doesn't have time to talk to anyone who isn't her mans. As she continues to type away, she asked exactly what Aikawa meant by his previous statement. And even though he isn't quite sure exactly how to put it, they then heard someone call out to Tomaki from a distance. And as Aikawa turned and noticed the man himself entering the building, he also heard a loud smash, leading him to turn and notice that Ayase had completely destroyed her keyboard once she had heard her man's name. And sure, he might be terrified, but I low-key think he might be bricked up. And at the end of the workday, the first to go was of course none other than Ayase. But following shortly after her was Tomaki. And believe it or not, following behind Tomaki was then Aikawa, as everyone now wonders if leaving work on time is the trendy thing to do right now. Meanwhile, Aikawa stands alone in the busy street, looking around for the two. And when he had finally spotted Tomaki, he trailed behind him slowly, following him behind a dark alley, before shortly after looking up and noticing that he had made it to a place called Hell and Muscle. It's as he passed through the entrance that he slowly made his way upstairs, until suddenly he began to hear some moaning and groaning, and bro couldn't believe what he was hearing as he quickly grabbed onto the door's handle, screaming what the hell was going on in there. But somebody was actually getting down and seriously, like actually laying down some pipe, leaving the two couple to wonder who the hell this guy was, all while accusing him of being a peeping Tom. And so as Aikawa quickly left the building, he genuinely thought Ayase and Tomaki had been in there. But now that he thinks about it, it actually doesn't make any sense at all, since their dynamic is that of a serious type and a wimpy old man, and figures that he had just been silly this whole time, while figuring that he'll just go grab dinner while he heads home. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Tomaki mentions that he didn't notice at all, to think Aikawa would have suspected them hanging out, which led Ayase to mention that it was a really good call they had changed gyms for the day. Still, Tomaki thinks that even if he had found out, it's not like they were doing anything wrong. But being locked in, Ayase hadn't heard a single word this man had just said, since today's goal will be to pretend to assist Tomaki and use that as an excuse to touch him. And come to think of it, they used to have pretty bold physical contact back in the day. So much so that just thinking about it gets her all hot and bothered, as she rushes through a couple sets of hanging leg raises, mentioning that before training, she usually likes to get all pumped up. And as for today's workout, they're going to be targeting the back. You see, beginners tend to overlook it, but the back is the second most important muscle group after the legs. First and foremost, she's going to need him to fix his posture, since fixing his hunch and improving that posture makes his proportions look better. It also helps with back pain and stiff shoulders, so she'll first have him do some reps of lateral pull downs. And as she watches Tomaki struggle from behind, she warns him not to move as she slowly reached out her trembling hand, resting it upon his shoulder. Soon after, her whole expression lit up and a smile spread across her face, followed by a soft blush as she felt a sense of accomplishment. And next up, they were on to some one-arm rows, as her goal going forward is to have him feel each back muscle one side at a time, instructing him to pull with his back and not with his arms, all while she unravels her gloves, because next up is to touch him with her bare hands, caressing all the way down to his forearm. And finally, their skin and sweat had been mixed together, all while she salivates from her mouth, thinking how it had felt good, and it was finally working. But now, she wanted to take it up a notch, as they move on to bent over rows. And just like she showed him before, she wanted him to push his hips in and pull his butt back, as she prepares herself for the big boom. And once Tomaki had swung his hips back, she had officially made it to her limit. Meanwhile, on the busy streets, someone called out to Aikawa from behind, and it was none other than Kaori, Tamaki's wife, who thought it was perfect timing, asking if he wanted to go grab dinner with her since one of her friends had cancelled. So right as they made their way into the restaurant and headed upstairs, they were given a private room all to themselves. But Kaori thought the view wasn't all that great and urged him to see for himself, as there's a building just right in front of them. And it's as they took a peek that they were then face to face with both Tomaki and Ayase on the other side of the building, as one group looks at a high libido workout session and the other two staring back at two cousins having dinner, leaving us to wonder what the hell is gonna happen next chapter. Yo, it's your boy Noodles, and if you want more peak fiction, then check out when this 2D loving otaku gets asked out by the popular girl in his class, and I'll see you guys on the other side.